Welcome back to another video, everyone. Today I'm going to be reading your Crash Bandicoot unpopular opinions and telling you whether or not you're right or wrong. I'm just kidding, these are opinions, you can have your own opinions, and who am I to say whether or not you're right or wrong? I wasn't even born when the original trilogy came out. He's existed longer than I have. I just thought this would be a little fun thing to do. I commented this on my community tab yesterday and we got 219 responses. Obviously I'm not going to be able to get to them all in one video because it would be way too long, but I might do a part 2 at some point in the future. Plus some of them I have read them and some of them are the same. I've realized by doing this that a lot of unpopular opinions aren't so unpopular after all. But yeah, before we get into that, definitely check me out on Twitter, because that way you can hear me complain about not having a CTR2 on here and on there. Let's get into it. After the Wrath of Cortex, Crunch became pointless. He always felt like a third wheel to me. I would agree and disagree. I wouldn't call him pointless because I do like him being part of the main squad. He's a nice addition to the good side. I like him being there with Crash, Coco, Polar, but I will agree that after the Wrath of Cortex, after, being the main villain in that game and then teaming up with the Bandicoots at the end, he didn't really do too much else. Like, yeah, in Nitro Kart, he was on the Bandicoot side, so he was in all the cutscenes. He was in tag team racing, and he was, standing around the park with some of the other characters, and you could do challenges for him and stuff, but that's all he really was. Then there were games like Twinsanity where he wasn't even in the game, unless you're counting that one cutscene where he's holding a birthday cake. He doesn't have any dialogue or anything, he's not really part of Twinsanity. And then in Crash of the Titans, he quite literally gets frozen at the beginning of the game, and is frozen all the way up until the very end. I'd say the next big role he had, unless I'm forgetting something, is Mind Over Mutant, because he does get possessed and you have to go and save him, and then you have a boss fight with him. So while I wouldn't say he was pointless, because I do like him being a character in the Crash universe, I would say he doesn't really have that big of an impact after Wrath of Cortex. Wrath of Cortex and Crash of the Titans are actually great games. I've always said that if people liked Warped, then you like Wrath of Cortex because it's the same fucking game. I'm going to disagree with this one because I don't think the Wrath of Cortex is Crash Warped. I think it tried its very best to be Crash Warped and failed. Like, yeah, they both have loads of vehicle levels, they both have shit vehicle levels, but the Wrath of Cortex has more shit vehicle levels. And then the controls, like Crash's jump is a lot floatier in Wrath of Cortex. I think the character models and the cutscenes in Wrath of Cortex are just so strange. So I think Wrath of Cortex tried to copy Warped, but I don't think it did a very good job of doing it. I wouldn't call it a bad game though, so I'm disagreeing with the last part saying that it's the same game. CTR Nitro-Fueled was killed by Activision because they refused to fix the obvious load time, split screen and online issues that were there from day one. Along with the snuck-in microtransactions, lack of interesting post-launch content, Grand Prix were a great idea but executed horribly, and catering to Reddit instead of the old fans that have been playing the original CTR for the past 2 decades. I don't think it's an unpopular opinion that Activision killed CTR by just taking Beanox off the project before they could fix the load times or fix online issues. They did a really good job of bringing content and Grand Prix to the game for as long as they did, but Activision really should have let them work on the game for a lot longer. They should have fixed all the issues. They should have added a lot more, online modes. They should have allowed them to make a new patch for the PS5 and Series X. They should have brought the game to PC. They definitely killed the game early by doing those things. I mean, if anything, just bring it to PC and then let modders let the game live on. Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant are good games, both in terms of graphics and gameplay, as much as it changed its genre. One thing I find hilarious is when people say Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant were good games, just not good Crash games. I always find that hilarious. But yeah, I think both definitely have problems even in terms of gameplay. Like Titans, I wasn't the biggest fan of how they just forced you to fight the same Titans in an area, and they put those red barriers up and you had to fight them over and over again. They kept spawning the same exact enemies and then you could continue, and they did it way too much. It's almost like they did it just to extend the length of the game. Graphically, I do like how both of the games look. Not my favorite art style of all the Crash games, but I think the graphics of them are fine. So this one is from Abdul. It's a pretty long thing, so I'm not going to read the whole thing out because it would take too long for the video, but I'll put the whole thing on the screen so you can pause it if you want to read it all. The one thing I'll say about this one that I disagree with is the music being some of the best in the series. So I don't think there's a single Crash game that has a bad soundtrack, unless I'm forgetting one of the weirder games like, I don't know, Crash Boom Bang. I can't remember the soundtrack of that, but let's be honest, the soundtrack is probably the best thing about Crash Boom Bang. But I think the whole series has such good music that it's hard to live up to it in a way. I think the Crash 4 soundtrack is good, but it doesn't have as many memorable songs from other games in my opinion. It has some bangers, don't get me wrong, like Food Run is probably one of my favorite soundtracks from the game, but I remember thinking after my first playthrough of the game that there wasn't as many memorable songs as, let's say, from the Wrath of Cortex or the original games. I think Crash Bash is just as good as the original trilogy and CTR. So Crash Bash is really where, like, a lot of people think the series started to go downhill. You had the original trilogy, everyone loved that, everyone loved CTR. And then Crash Bash came. It's really a mixed game. Some people love it, some people hate it, and you could say the same thing about every other game that came after that. I did a review on it, and while I am in the process of remaking those review videos, because back then I would stretch 4:3 footage to 16:9, I still think my points in those videos are accurate, and in the Crash Bash review I said that there's too many repeated mini-games, because every new warp room that you unlock, you have to play the same mini-games again. It's just a different variation. That, plus the fact that you have to get the gems and the crystals by playing the same minigame again, you end up playing the same thing way too many times. Not to mention the difficulty. It's such a ridiculously tough Crash game. I'd say it's probably harder than Crash 4 to get everything and fully complete the game. So while I would think for those reasons it's an unpopular opinion to prefer it over the original trilogy or CTR, I do enjoy the game casually for the most part. Like even just going for a normal story playthrough to the end of the game, that can be challenging. Some of the minigames are so shit and just, you know, infuriate you, but I think overall it's an enjoyable game. But yeah, hell no do I prefer it to like the original trilogy or CTR. The Elementals should return. I don't know whether or not this is unpopular or not, because you never hear anybody talking about the Elementals, but yeah, I think they could return, like in Crash 5 or something, or in a future Crash game. I think, you know, with their abilities, they could, you know, definitely come up with something creative. The thing is though, in Crash 4, of course, we've been introduced to more masks. So I don't know whether or not in the next Crash game they would come in and say, yep, this game is also based around new masks. I guess they could do that, like in Crash 4 you get introduced to the new masks, and then in Crash 5 the Elementals come in and they have some relation to them somehow, maybe. I don't know. Polar is the best character ever. No one's arguing against that. I think Crash 1 fucking sucks ass. I actually believe it's a bad game. A solid 4 out of 10. I admit that the music is fire, but when compared to 2, 3, 4 and the Wrath of Cortex, I'd gladly take them over Crash 1 any day of the week. 1 has pissed me off more times than I can count with how stupid some of the problems are. I will admit that the remake of 1 is vastly superior and in my opinion the definitive way of playing Crash 1. Avoid the original at all costs. I will agree that the definitive way of playing Crash 1 is the Insane Trilogy. I love the Insane Trilogy, so if I'm going to return to the PS1 games, it's going to be with Crash 3, probably Crash 2 as well, but not Crash 1. And while I won't describe it as Crash 1 fucking sucks ass like this person does, I will say Crash 2 and 3 definitely improved upon it a ton, to the point where it is quite tough to go back to Crash 1. Crash Tag Team Racing is a good game, and the only reason why its reputation is so bad is because of people like Ant Dude and Kid Icarus. I don't necessarily agree, because I mean, while I wasn't around when the game came out, I mean I was around because I was playing it, but I was like fucking 5 or 6 or something, so I wasn't there on Metacritic looking up the review scores, looking at all the different reviews. From what I know, it had mixed reviews, like it was met with mixed reception from when it came out. So clearly, you know, it wasn't just Ant Dude or Kid Icarus that have made people think it was a bad game, because people already did before that. Maybe they've had an influence on people that haven't played the game in a long time, or people that haven't played it at all, and they just look at it and like, yep, Crash Tag Team Racing, that was a bad game because, well, yeah, I've never played it, but Kid Icarus did a review on it, and I kind of agree with what he's saying based on the footage that was shown on the screen. Maybe in that regard, yeah, like they might have had an effect on that. But Tag Team Racing was, I think it was considered the worst Crash Racing game even when it came out. If you've seen my reviews though, you'll know I like the game, and I do like it a lot. Crash 4 wasn't hard at all. Yeah, I'd say this is unpopular. Obviously, the more you play it, the better you get at the game, the less frustrating it will be. But as a first-time playthrough, even like a first-time 100%ing it, I think it's tough. I think it's a very tough game. I have a few. So again, there's a long comment, so I'll just put on the screen and I'll talk about a few of them. Twinsanity is a top 3 Crash game despite its glitches. Can't decide between Crash Twinsanity and Crash 2 for the #1 spot. This one is insane because even with how broken and glitchy Crash Twinsanity is, a lot of people still think of it as one of the top Crash games. So just imagine if they had all the time in the world to fix it and make it the game it was supposed to be. If people think it's so good in the state that it came out in, just imagine what they would think of it if it was finished. I hope one day that we do get to see what it's like. Crash looks terrible in NST, but Coco looks amazing. Crash looks amazing in Crash 4, but Coco looks terrible. Yeah, I disagree with this one. I think they both look good in both games. I think the NST art style is better suited for the remake of the original games, but I think going forward, Crash 4's art style is perfect for, you know, making the series more modern, I guess. Cortex should stop trying to kill Crash. Yeah, just give it up, buddy. You've tried a lot and it just hasn't worked out for you. And, you know, normally I would say never give up on whatever you want to achieve in life. You know, if you want to achieve something, keep working at it and you can do it no matter how long it takes. Crash is the main character. He's not going to die, so Cortex, just give it up. They could do something a bit more interesting with, you know, Cortex in the future Crash games. Instead of just having him, you know, kill Crash, they could come up with something a bit different. I mean, I guess it is what they kind of did in Twinsanity, but even then, while they were working together, it still revolved around him trying to kill Crash. He tried to kill him at the beginning of the game, he tried to kill him at the very end. So it would be interesting to see what they could do if he just never tried to kill him. Like, not once throughout the game. Maybe there's like a bigger threat or something that they both need to destroy. And again, that kind of was the evil twins, that was the bigger threat in Twinsanity. Just at the end of it, not have him go back to instantly killing Crash. Not permanently, just temporarily for that game, you know, because it would be nice to see something like that. What would be really cool is seeing Crash and all the good guys work with all the bad guys. Like, they're all together working with each other to defeat some sort of bigger threat, some enemy that they have in common. That being said, that is going to be it for this video. I've been recording for quite a while. I don't know how long it's going to be. Like I said though, while things are slow with Crash Bandicoot, not much going on. The only thing I have going on right now is like me re-reviewing all the old games. I might do more of these because, you know, there's a lot that I didn't read out. We got 200 replies. So I might do more of these in the future because at the end of the day, this was just straight up pure Crash discussion, which is exactly why I created this channel in the first place, to have a place to talk with Crash fans about Crash. That being said, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Definitely subscribe if you're new here. And that being said, I will see you all in my next video.